The black waitress greeted Korean Mafia boss's mom. Her Busan Dialect greeting shocked everyone. The elegant woman in the tailored gray suit stopped mid-step, her composed expression cracking for just a moment. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all, missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, back to the story. The crystal water glasses at Hanok restaurant caught the light just so, refracting rainbows across the pristine white tablecloths. Laila Chen moved between the tables with the practiced invisibility of someone who had perfected the art of being overlooked. Her hands never trembled as she poured wine at precise angles, her smile never reached her eyes, and her presence never registered in the memories of the wealthy diners who treated her like elegant furniture. But invisibility, Laila had learned long ago, was the most powerful weapon a person could possess. 25 years old, and she'd already lived 3 lifetimes. The first ended at 7, when her adoptive parents, white, wealthy, uncomfortable with the reality of raising a black daughter, abandoned her at a Los Angeles bus station with a note pinned to her jacket. The second began 3 terrifying weeks later, when a Korean woman with kind eyes found her sleeping behind a dumpster and somehow arranged her passage across an ocean to Busan, South Korea, where the impossible happened. The Kim family took her in. Kim Soo-jin and Kim Tae-ho had no biological children. They were business advisors to one of Korea's most powerful families, the Lees, and they saw something in the abandoned black child that others missed. They named her Lee Ji-won and raised her as their own, teaching her the language, the culture, the traditional ways. For 11 years, she had a home. Then came the fire. The official report called it a business dispute. Laila, 18 and alone, knew it was murder. She'd heard her foster father on the phone the night before, telling someone he had evidence that he couldn't stay silent any longer. By morning, their home was ash, and everyone she loved was dead. Except her, who'd climbed out a second-story window while her world burned. That was when her third life began. Now, her studio apartment in Queens looks like a detective's obsession board. Maps of Manhattan covered one wall, red pins marking businesses owned or frequented by Song Wei, the man who'd betrayed the Li family, embezzled millions, and ordered the hit on her parents to cover his tracks. Surveillance photos, financial records, 7 years of meticulous intelligence gathering filled filing boxes stacked to the ceiling. Every waitressing job, every catering gig, every cleaning position had been carefully chosen. Song Wei's people ate at nice restaurants. They held meetings in hotel conference rooms. They never noticed the servers. Laila's phone buzzed during her afternoon shift. The text from her manager made her stomach drop. Li Mei arrives tonight. Private dining room. Elena called in sick. You're covering. Li Mei, matriarch of the Li family, Song Wei's former employer, and mother to Liang, the current Li family boss. The woman was flying from Seoul to investigate irregularities in her son's New York operations, irregularities that Laila's anonymous tips helped bring to light. The staff meeting that evening was tense. Manager Park, sweating through his expensive shirt, paced before them. The Li family doesn't just dine at restaurants, they own them. One mistake, one moment of disrespect, and this establishment closes. Am I understood? Laila stood at the back, heart pounding. She'd spent 7 years preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, building her case. But she'd planned to remain invisible, to pass her intelligence to the right people and disappear. Now, she would be walking directly into Li Mei's presence. Some traps, she thought, you walk into with your eyes wide open. The private dining room was a study in controlled elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline, and a single long table dominated the space, already set with traditional Korean tableware. Li Mei sat at the head in a perfectly tailored gray suit, her silver hair swept into an immaculate bun. Beside her, Liang, 32, sharp-featured, expensive watch catching the light, scrolled through his phone with the casual arrogance of a man accustomed to power. 4 security personnel stood at strategic points around the room, bulges under their jackets unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. Laila entered carrying the traditional tea service on a lacquered tray, her movements measured and precise. She approached the table, set down the tray, and then did something that made the entire room go still. She bowed, not the casual bow Americans gave when they were trying to be polite, but a perfect jol, the deep, formal bow reserved for honored elders in traditional Korean families. As she straightened, she spoke in flawless Busan dialect, her voice carrying the particular formal inflection taught only in certain households. 어르신, 평안히 계셨습니까? Elder, have you been at peace? The effect was instantaneous. Liang's hand moved toward his jacket. The nearest security guard's fingers twitched. Li Mei's teacup halfway to her lips froze in mid-air. The silence that followed was so complete that Laila could hear her own heartbeat. Li Mei set down her cup with deliberate care, her eyes locked on Laila's face. When she spoke, her Korean was soft but edged with steel. Where did you learn to speak like this? I was raised in Busan, ma'am, Laila replied, maintaining the formal register, keeping her eyes respectfully lowered. From the time I was 7 until I was 18. Look at me. Laila raised her eyes. She watched Li Mei take in what she saw, a young black woman, natural hair pulled into a professional bun, warm brown skin, intelligent eyes, standing with the posture and bearing of someone trained in the old ways, the contradiction written across her face. A black child in Busan. Li Mei's statement held layers of questions. For 11 years. In whose household? This was the moment. 7 years of planning, of careful invisibility, of waiting for the right opportunity. Laila could deflect, could lie, could retreat back into the safety of being nobody, or she could step into the light. I was raised in Busan, ma'am, Laila replied, maintaining the formal register, keeping her eyes respectfully lowered. From the time I was 7 until I was 18. Look at me. Laila raised her eyes. She watched Li Mei take in what she saw, a young black woman, natural hair pulled into a professional bun, warm brown skin, intelligent eyes, standing with the posture and bearing of someone trained in the old ways, the contradiction written across her face. A black child in Busan. Li Mei's statement held layers of questions. For 11 years. In whose household? This was the moment. 7 years of planning, of careful invisibility, of waiting for the right opportunity. Laila could deflect, could lie, could retreat back into the safety of being nobody, or she could step into the light. I'm Lee Ji-won, she said quietly, each word a stone dropping into still water. Daughter of Kim Soo-jin and Kim Tae-ho. The room exploded into motion. Liang shot to his feet, his chair scraping across the floor. Security personnel moved forward, hands reaching for weapons. But Li Mei's hand rose, a single gesture that froze everyone in place. The Kims had no daughter, Liang stated in English, his voice hard with suspicion in something else. Shock, perhaps, or recognition. Laila turned to face him directly, switching to Korean without conscious thought. They had me. They found me, took me in, raised me as their own. They gave me a name, a home, a family. Her voice remained steady despite the emotion threatening to crack through. They gave me everything. Li Mei set down her cup with deliberate care, her eyes locked on Laila's face. When she spoke, her Korean was soft but edged with steel. "Everyone out," she commanded in Korean. Then, turning to look directly at Laila, she added, "Except her." If you're not subscribed, you're gambling, because when another interesting story like this drops, subscribers get first access. Non-subscribers, you'll see everyone talking about it and have no idea what happened. Hit subscribe right now or spend next week on the outside looking in. Your choice. Choose wrong and you'll regret it. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from and what time exactly are you watching this video. So, what's going to be? The door clicked shut behind the last security guard, leaving Laila alone with Li Mei and Liang. The older woman gestured to a chair, but Laila remained standing. It would be improper to sit unbidden in the presence of an elder. Li Mei's lips curved slightly at this. A test passed without words. "Tell me," Li Mei said simply. Laila's hands clasped in front of her, the way Kim Soo-jin had taught her when recounting difficult truths. "My American parents adopted me as an infant. White couple, good intentions, I suppose. But by the time I was 7, I'd become too complicated for them to explain to their friends, their church, their comfortable world. They left me at a bus station in Los Angeles with $40 and a note saying they couldn't do it anymore." Liang leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "And somehow you ended up in Busan?" "I survived on the streets for 3 weeks. Then a Korean woman found me sleeping behind a restaurant. She spoke no English, I spoke no Korean, but she took me to a shelter, made phone calls, arranged things I didn't understand at the time." Laila's voice remained steady, clinical, as if recounting someone else's story. "A month later, I was on a plane to Korea. The Kim family was waiting at the airport. They took in a black child, in Busan, in a household that served our family. They saw a child who needed a home. Kim Tae-hoo said later that he and his wife had prayed for a daughter. When I appeared, they believed I was their answer." Laila allowed herself a small smile at the memory. "Sujin Almoni taught me everything, the language, the customs, how to move through a room, how to serve with dignity, how to honor the old ways. She said that grace transcends skin color." Liang pushed off the wall, his voice sharp. "The Kims died 7 years ago in what was ruled a business dispute, a fire that consumed their entire home. Convenient timing for you to appear now, claiming to be their daughter." "There was nothing convenient about it," Laila replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I was 18. I lost everyone I loved in a single night. I've spent 7 years trying to understand why." Li Mei's eyes narrowed with recognition of something in Laila's tone, the particular cadence of suppressed grief that only those who'd truly lost family would recognize. "When Sujin served tea in our home, how did she hold the pot?" The question seemed random, but Laila understood immediately. Left hand supporting the base, right hand on the handle, pouring from the left side of the guest, never crossing the center line of their body. It was a sign of respect passed down from her grandmother. "And on the coldest day of winter, what did she prepare?" "Patchuk with whole red beans, never mashed. She said the whole beans represented completeness, family staying whole through hardship." Laila's voice softened. "She made it for me every winter on the anniversary of the day they found me." Li Mei's composure cracked for just a moment. No one outside our immediate circle knew these things. "You could have researched them," Liang interjected, though his conviction was wavering. "Found people who worked in the household, extracted information." Laila reached beneath her collar and pulled out a delicate silver pendant, a small crane in flight. "Sujin Almoni gave me this on my 16th birthday. She said cranes mate for life, that family is chosen and kept through loyalty." She held it out toward Li Mei. "You were there that day. You complimented her choice." Li Mei's hand trembled slightly as she reached out to touch the pendant. "I remember." The silence that followed held the weight of recognition, of grief shared across years and continents. Finally, Li Mei straightened, her composure restored, but her eyes softer than before. "You will serve us dinner tonight. Only you. I want to see everything Su Jin taught you." As Laila bowed and moved toward the door, Liang's voice stopped her. His English was quiet, dangerous. "If you're lying, if this is some elaborate con, you won't survive the week." Laila returned back, responding in Korean with perfect formal diction. "If I were lying, I would have chosen an easier story to tell." The first course arrived on pristine white porcelain. Nemul banchan, 5 varieties of seasoned vegetables arranged in the traditional compass pattern. Laila presented each dish with both hands, announcing its contents in formal Korean, placing them in the precise order Kim Soo-jin had drilled into her until it became muscle memory. North, south, east, west, center. Balance in all things. Li Mei watched her with the intensity of someone reading a familiar text in an unfamiliar language. "The neighborhood where the Kims lived. Describe it." "Gamcheon Culture Village," Laila replied, pouring barley tea with the exact angle and distance Soo-jin had taught her. "Steep hillside, houses painted in pastels like a watercolor painting. Our home was blue with white trim. You could see the ocean from the kitchen window on clear days. The Ajuma next door sold tteokbokki from a cart, and she always gave me extra because she said I was too skinny." The fish market they frequented. Jagolchi. Kim Tae-ho went every Saturday morning at 5. He said the best mackerel came in with the dawn boats. He taught me to select fish by the clarity of the eyes and the resilience of the flesh. Laila brought the second course, grilled mackerel, the irony not lost on her. He said knowing quality from counterfeit was the most important skill a person could learn. Liang shifted in his seat, his eyes tracking her every movement with predatory focus, looking for the slip, the mistake, the proof of deception. But Laila had lived this life. She wasn't performing it, she was remembering it. The soup course arrived on a wheeled cart, delivered by another server who bowed and retreated quickly. Miak guk, seaweed soup, traditionally served for birthdays and honored guests. Laila began to ladle it into individual bowls when the scent hit her. Subtle, almost masked by the seaweed and sesame oil, but unmistakable if you knew what to look for. Bitter almonds, a faint chemical sweetness beneath the savory broth. Her hand froze mid-pour. Li Mei lifted her spoon, and Laila's body moved before her mind could calculate the consequences. She lunged forward, her hand closing around Li Mei's wrist. "Don't eat that," she said in urgent Korean, her voice cutting through the elegant silence like a knife. Liang exploded from his chair. "How dare you touch her? It's poisoned." Laila didn't release Li Mei's wrist, her eyes locked on the older woman's face. "Aconite root. I can smell it. Please, don't eat it." Security burst through the door, weapons drawn. Liang grabbed Laila's shoulder, wrenching her away from his mother, but Li Mei raised her other hand. "Test it," she commanded, "now." The next 10 minutes were controlled chaos. A security specialist produced a portable testing kit. The soup was analyzed while Laila stood against the wall, Liang's hand still gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. The kitchen was locked down. Staff were questioned. And then the confirmation came, delivered in a terse voice that made everyone in the room go still. Aconitum, concentrated enough to kill within 5 minutes of ingestion. The head chef was found unconscious in the walk-in freezer, drugged. The sous chef who'd prepared the soup had vanished, leaving behind his knives and his phone. A professional who knew exactly when to disappear. Li Mei turned to Laila, who remained motionless against the wall, her server's mask finally cracked to reveal the sharp intelligence beneath. "You saved my life. Why?" "Your family gave me a family. The Kims served you with honor for 20 years. Everything I am, everything I know, I owe to them, and through them, to you." Liang released her arm slowly, his expression shifting from suspicion to calculation. "How did you know about the poison? That level of knowledge?" Kim Soo-jin was trained in traditional Korean medicine before she entered service. She taught me to identify hundreds of medicinal plants and herbs, including the ones that kill. She met his gaze steadily. She said a woman should know how to heal and how to harm. Knowledge is protection. Li Mei and Liang exchanged a long look, a conversation happening in silence that Laila couldn't quite read. Finally, Li Mei spoke, her voice carrying the weight of decision. "Come with us. We need to talk somewhere secure." She paused, and something softened in her expression. "Please, Ji-won." The sound of her Korean name from Li Mei's lips hit harder than any accusation. It was recognition. It was invitation. It was the beginning of something Laila hadn't let herself hope for in 7 years. It was the end of being invisible. Laila's studio apartment in Queens was a study in contradictions. The furniture was minimal and secondhand. A futon, a small table, 2 folding chairs. But one entire wall was covered in maps, photographs, and documents connected by red string like a spider's web of conspiracy. Li Mei stopped in the doorway, her sharp intake of breath the only sound in the sudden silence. "My God," Liang breathed, moving closer to examine the wall. His finger traced a line of photographs. "You've been hunting Song Wei for 7 years." Laila closed the door behind them, triple-locking it out of habit. "Since the night he killed my family." The center of the wall held a photograph of Song Wei, 58, distinguished, smiling at a charity gala. Around it radiated connections like a solar system, bank statements, property records, surveillance photos, handwritten notes in both English and Korean. 7 years of obsession made visible. "The Kims were investigating him," Laila said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. "They discovered he was embezzling from your family's businesses. Millions of dollars over the course of 5 years, moved through shell companies and offshore accounts. Kim Tae-ho had gathered evidence, was preparing to bring it to you." She turned to Li Mei. "But before he could, our home was firebombed. 2 in the morning, accelerant poured through the mail slot, ignited with a timer." "How did you survive?" Li Mei's question was barely a whisper. "I was in my room on the 2nd floor. I heard the whoosh when it ignited, smelled the smoke. I went to my parents' room, but the hallway was already engulfed." Layla's hands clenched at her sides. "I screamed for them. I tried to reach them. But the fire..." She stopped, breathed, continued. "I went out my bedroom window onto the neighbor's roof. By the time I got to the street, the entire house was an inferno. Everyone inside was already gone." Liang moved along the wall, examining documents with the focus of someone trained to read between lines. "You were 18, alone in a foreign country, with no family, no proof, and a target on my back if Song Wei knew I'd survived." Laila pulled out a file box, began spreading its contents on the small table. "So I became invisible. I changed my appearance, used my American name, moved to the US, and I started gathering evidence." "By working in restaurants," Li Mei said, understanding dawning. "Service positions. Song Wei's people eat at nice places. They hold meetings in hotel conference rooms, celebrate promotions at upscale bars, and they never, ever look at the waitstaff." Layla's smile was bitter. "Being black in predominantly white or Asian spaces made me even more invisible. I was part of the furniture. I listened. I photographed receipts, business cards left on tables. I built a network." "A network?" Liang looked up from a financial spreadsheet he'd been examining. "Other service workers, bartenders, hotel housekeepers, valets, delivery drivers, the invisible people who see everything." Laila pointed to a section of the wall covered in restaurant logos and hotel names. "We share information. A tip here, an overheard conversation there. 7 years of accumulated intelligence." Li Mei's finger touched a photograph paper-clipped to a bank statement. The numbers told a story of systematic theft. $23 million, conservatively. He built a rival organization with our money. And he's been positioning himself to take over completely. Laila pulled out today's most damning evidence. Surveillance photos taken by a busboy at a coffee shop 3 blocks from Hanok. The soup chef who disappeared, sitting across from a man Liang clearly recognized. "Chen," Liang said, flatly, "Song Wei's head of security. Taken this morning, 2 hours before your mother's dinner reservation." Laila let the implication hang in the air. Li Mei sank into one of the folding chairs, her composure finally cracking. The Kims tried to protect us. They died trying to protect us, and we didn't know. For 7 years, we didn't know. This is enough to move against him, Liang said, his voice hard with controlled rage. With this evidence, we can— There's more, Laila interrupted. Song Wei has people inside your organization. Today proves it. Someone gave your mother's schedule, her dining location, detailed enough information to arrange an assassination attempt. She met Liang's eyes. How many people knew she was coming to New York? How many knew where she'd be eating? The question landed like a stone in still water, ripples of implications spreading outward. Liang and Li Mei exchanged a look that spoke of years of family business, of trust betrayed, of an empire built on loyalty that had been rotted from within. "We need to identify them," Li Mei said, finally, her voice regaining its steel. "And we need to do it without Song Wei knowing we're coming." Laila felt something shift in the room, an alliance forming in the space between words. 3 people who'd been strangers an hour ago, now bound by shared enemies and shared loss. Li Mei, the matriarch who'd lost loyal servants. Liang, the heir, whose empire was compromised. And Laila, the invisible woman who'd spent 7 years preparing for exactly this moment. Then we work together, and we finish what the Kims started. The next 72 hours transformed Laila's tiny apartment into a command center. Li Mei worked from the futon with a secure satellite phone, speaking rapid Korean to contacts in Seoul, people she'd known for 40 years, whose loyalty was written in blood and shared history. Liang commandeered the small table, his laptop displaying organizational charts of his New York operation, each name a potential traitor. And Laila moved between them, her wall of evidence now serving as a tactical map for dismantling Song Wei's network from within. "Financial transfers," Laila said, pointing to a pattern she'd highlighted across multiple spreadsheets. "Song Wei's people are careful, but they're not perfect. Look here. Bonuses paid to these 3 employees exactly 2 days after each major Li family business decision, not before, after. They're being rewarded for intelligence they've already delivered." Liang leaned closer, his expensive cologne mixing with the cheap coffee Laila had brewed at 3 in the morning. "David Park, head of acquisitions, Susan Chen, my personal assistant," his jaw tightened, "and Marcus Kim, our legal counsel." "People you trusted," Li Mei observed from across the room, her tone sympathetic but unsurprised. Song Wei always had a gift for identifying weaknesses. Money, ambition, resentment. He knew which lever to pull. The purge was surgical and silent. David Park was called to a meeting and never made it back to his office. Susan Chen found her access codes disabled when she arrived at work Monday morning, security waiting to escort her out. Marcus Kim was arrested at his home by federal agents. Liang had contacts of his own, and embezzlement charges were easier to prove than treason. Meanwhile, Laila activated her network. A text to a bartender at Song Wei's favorite restaurant, a call to a hotel housekeeper who cleaned his mistress's apartment, a coded message to a parking attendant at his office building. The invisible people of New York became her eyes and ears, reporting movements, patterns, deviations from routine. Liang watched her coordinate this shadow operation with growing respect. "Where did you learn operational security, financial forensics, this level of tactical planning?" Laila looked up from her laptop, where she was running pattern analysis on Song Wei's cell phone records, data obtained through a telecommunications worker who owed her a favor. "Kim Tae-ho taught me the basics, how to think strategically, how to see patterns, how to understand that information is power." She returned to her screen, fingers flying across the keyboard. "The rest I taught myself. Community college courses in accounting and computer science, online tutorials and data analysis. I worked as a night cleaner at a cybersecurity firm for 8 months just to eavesdrop on their training sessions." "You built yourself into a weapon," Li Mei said quietly. She'd been watching them work together for hours now, seeing how Liang deferred to Layla's analytical mind, how Layla anticipated his questions before he asked them. Something was shifting between them, respect earned in the crucible of shared purpose. On the third day, as dawn light filtered through the apartment's single window, Li Mei approached Layla with something wrapped in silk. I went to storage yesterday, the items we saved from the Kim house before it was demolished. She unwrapped the cloth to reveal a jade bracelet, delicate and ancient, the stone carved with cranes in flight. Sujin wore this every day. I thought it was lost in the fire. Layla's hands trembled as she took it, feeling the weight of memory and grief. She was wearing it that night. I saw it on her wrist when I tried to reach her. Then someone saved it. Perhaps the firefighters, perhaps a neighbor. It found its way to us. Li Mei's eyes were bright with unshed tears. She would want you to have it. You've honored her memory in ways she never could have imagined. Layla slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, and for a moment she was 18 again, watching her world burn. But this time she wasn't alone. This time she had allies, resources, a plan. Song Wei will know we've purged his people, Liang said, studying the tactical map Layla had created. He'll either retreat or escalate. Song Wei will escalate, Layla replied with certainty. Men like him don't retreat. We've wounded his pride, disrupted his timeline. He'll move to finish this quickly. Li Mei nodded. Then we force him into the open, make him come to us on our terms. Layla stared at Song Wei's photograph on her wall, the man who'd haunted 7 years of her life. She could feel the pull of revenge, the desire to end him the way he ended her family. But Kim Tae-ho's voice echoed in her memory. True power lies in justice, not in vengeance. We do this right, she said finally. Not just for us, for everyone he's hurt. The intelligence came through Layla's network at 11 p.m. on the 4th night. A banquet manager at the Korean Cultural Center confirming that Song Wei had purchased a table at their annual gala. A public event celebrating Korean-American business achievements, 500 attendees, press coverage, the mayor scheduled to appear. Perfect cover for a man trying to look legitimate while planning murder. We hit him there, Liang said immediately, his hand already reaching for his phone. Quick, clean, before he knows we're coming. No. Layla's voice cut through his momentum like a blade. She was staring at the event details on her laptop screen, her expression gone cold. It's a trap. What are you talking about? This is our chance. Look at the pattern. Layla pulled up her files on the Kim family fire, spreading them beside the cultural center information. The Kims were killed the night before they planned to meet with your mother. Song Wei lured Kim Tae-ho into scheduling a meeting at their home, made it seem urgent, private. Then he struck when they were most vulnerable, in a place they felt safe. Li Mei moved closer, reading over Layla's shoulder. He's doing it again. He knows we've purged his people. He knows we're coming for him. So he picks a public venue with multiple exits, witnesses, police presence. Layla's fingers traced the cultural center's floor plan. If Liang shows up looking for a fight, Song Wei becomes the victim. Business leader attacked by rival gang members at charity event. The press writes his story for him. Liang's jaw clenched. So we let him walk around free while he plans his next move? No. We use the public setting against him. Layla opened a new document, began typing rapidly. He's expecting violence. We give him exposure. We get him on record, confessing, revealing his network. Then we let the law handle him. And how exactly do we do that? Liang demanded. Layla looked up, a grim smile playing at her lips. The same way I've done everything else for 7 years. I become invisible. The plan took shape over the next 6 hours. Liang would attend the gala publicly, drawing Song Wei's attention and security resources. Layla would infiltrate as catering staff. The cultural center used the same service company that handled Hanok's events, and Layla had contacts there. Li Mei would coordinate from a secure hotel suite 3 blocks away, with direct lines to both NYPD contacts and federal investigators who'd been watching Song Wei's financial crimes. Dawn found Laila changing into the catering uniform, black pants, white shirt, the same anonymous costume that had been her camouflage for 7 years. She caught Liang watching her in the mirror's reflection, his expression complicated. "I judged you," he said quietly. "When you walked into that dining room, I saw your skin before I heard your words. I saw a server before I saw a person." "Everyone does." Laila adjusted her collar, hiding the jade bracelet beneath her sleeve. "I've built a life on it. Expectations are weapons if you know how to use them. That's a hard way to live. It's the only way I know." Li Mei entered from the bedroom carrying a small equipment case. Inside, a button camera disguised as part of Laila's uniform, a voice recorder the size of a matchbox, and a panic button linked directly to Liang's security team. "Your parents would be proud of the woman you've become," she said, helping Laila attach the devices. "Su Jin always said you had a warrior's heart in a diplomat's body." Laila's throat tightened. "I wish they could see this. See Song Wei finally facing consequences." "They see it," Li Mei said firmly, "and they're not the only ones watching over you tonight." The final check was mechanical, professional. Communication devices tested, extraction routes memorized, contingencies planned for 9 different scenarios. But as they prepared to leave, Liang to his penthouse to dress for the gala, Li Mei to her command post, Laila to infiltrate the cultural center's kitchen, one truth hung unspoken between them. Tonight, 7 years of invisible warfare would finally become visible, and there would be no going back to the shadows. The Korean Cultural Center blazed with light and laughter, 500 people in formal wear celebrating success stories of the Korean-American dream. Crystal chandeliers reflected off silk gowns and tailored tuxedos. A string quartet played traditional melodies with contemporary arrangements. And through it all moved servers in black and white, invisible as ghosts, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Laila was one shadow among many. She watched Liang make his entrance, commanding attention in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than she'd earned in 6 months. Song Wei's head turned immediately, tracking him across the room. Good. Eyes on the obvious threat meant nobody was watching the help. Laila moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, refilling glasses, offering canapes, mapping the building's layout with each pass. Service corridors branched off the main ballroom. Private meeting rooms lined the second floor. And there, a closed door with 2 men standing guard, trying to look casual and failing. She took the service stairs, emerging in a back hallway with a tray of premium whiskey and crystal glasses. The guards barely glanced at her as she approached. "Refreshments for Mr. Song," she said in unaccented English, her posture submissive, forgettable. One guard knocked, opened the door, spoke in Korean. A voice from within granted permission. Laila entered. Song Wei sat at a conference table, phone to his ear, papers spread before him. He was older than his photograph suggested, 60 now perhaps, with silver threading his black hair. Distinguished, respectable, a pillar of the community. He didn't look like a man who'd ordered her family burned alive. "Leave the drinks and go," he said dismissively in English, not even glancing up. Laila set the tray on the sideboard, arranging glasses with deliberate care. The button camera on her uniform captured every document on the table. The recorder in the whiskey decanter began its work. She'd turned to leave when Song Wei's phone conversation shifted into rapid Korean. "The Li problem needs to be resolved tonight. Liang is here, exposed, arrogant as his mother." A pause. Listening. "The same way we finished what we started with the Kims. Fire draws no attention at a gala. Candles, decorations, so many accidents waiting to happen." Laila's hand froze on the door handle. 7 years of training in invisibility warred with 7 years of rage finally finding its target. "I said leave," Song Wei snapped, his attention finally landing on her stillness. Laila turned slowly, meeting his eyes for the first time. When she spoke, her Korean was perfect, formal, the exact address used by household staff to their employers. "Yes, Sajungnim." The word hung in the air between them. Song Wei's eyes narrowed, something in her tone, in the specific inflection, in the way she held herself despite the server's uniform. "You speak Korean." It was almost a question. I learned in Busan, Laila replied, letting her accent shift, letting the Busan dialect color her words. From a family who served yours with honor. Song Wei stood slowly, his phone forgotten. What family taught you to speak like that? This was the moment, the choice between invisibility and truth, between safety and justice. Laila felt the weight of Kim Soo-jin's jade bracelet on her wrist, hidden beneath her sleeve. She thought of Kim Tae-ho teaching her to see patterns, to plan, to survive. She thought of 7 years of being nobody, and she chose to be somebody. The Kim family, she said clearly. Do you remember them? Kim Tae-ho and Kim Soo-jin, the people you murdered 7 years ago. Recognition dawned like sickness across his face. Ji-won, the little black girl they took in. His shock transformed into something uglier. You thought you died in the fire. You wanted me to, just like you wanted them to die before they could expose your theft. Layla's voice remained steady, clinical. The recorder captured every word. They discovered you were embezzling from the Li family. They were gathering evidence, so you killed them. They would have destroyed everything I built. Song Wei's composure cracked, rage bleeding through. 20 years of loyalty and they would have handed me to Li Mei like a criminal. You are a criminal. You built nothing. You stole everything. Song Wei's laugh was bitter. And you think you can stop me, a waitress, a girl playing detective? He moved toward Laila, and Laila saw murder in his eyes, the same calculation that had condemned her family. You should have stayed invisible. I'm not just a waitress, Laila said, and her hand went to her collar, deliberately touching the button camera. I'm a witness, and I've recorded every word. Song Wei lunged, years of rage and desperation compressed into violence. But Laila had been trained by Kim Tae-ho, who'd believed her daughter should know how to protect herself. She sidestepped, redirected his momentum, used his weight against him in a fluid combination that spoke of countless hours of practice. The door exploded inward. Liang's security team poured through in coordinated precision, weapons drawn. Song Wei's guards reached for guns that were disabled before they could clear holsters. The choreography of professional violence, clean and efficient. Song Wei crashed to the floor, Layla's knee in his back, her training finally meeting its purpose. She looked up to find Liang in the doorway, staring at her with something between shock and admiration. Got it all, she said quietly, touching her collar again. Every confession, every threat, everything we need. The Cultural Center security office was cramped and tense, monitors displaying frozen footage of Song Wei's takedown. He sat handcuffed to a chair, his distinguished facade shattered, raging in Korean about lawyers and rights and the mistake everyone was making. Liang stood against the wall, arms crossed, his expression cold as winter. We can handle this quietly, he said in English, his meaning unmistakable. Traditional way. No trials, no exposure, no risk of him talking his way out of consequences. Laila stepped between Liang and Song Wei, her server's uniform still pristine despite the violence. No, we do this differently. He killed your family. And if we kill him, we become him. Layla's voice carried the weight of 7 years' consideration. We become people who solve problems with murder, who hide crimes in darkness. But if we expose him, if we let the world see exactly what he is, she touched the button camera, still recording everything, then we honor the Kim's memory. They tried to do this the right way. So will I. Li Mei entered the office, flanked by 2 men in federal badges. Ji-won is right. Let the law have him. She looked at Song Wei with contempt, decades in the making. You wanted legitimacy, respectability. Now face legitimate consequences. The recordings were devastating. Song Wei's confession about the Kim family murders, his discussion of tonight's planned assassination, financial evidence Laila had gathered over 7 years, now backed by federal forensic accountants. Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering. The charges multiplied as Song Wei's organization crumbled, members turning on each other in desperate attempts at plea bargains. A week later, Laila stood in her apartment, taking down the wall of evidence piece by piece. 7 years of her life, reduced to boxes for the federal prosecutors. The red strings came down, the photographs, the maps. The space looked larger without her obsession covering every surface. The knock on her door was expected. Li Mei and Liang entered, both dressed more casually than she'd ever seen them. Li Mei in elegant slacks and a silk blouse, Liang in jeans and a sweater that made him look younger, almost approachable. "We have a proposal," Li Mei began, settling onto the futon with the same grace she'd shown in the restaurant's private dining room. "The Li family needs someone who sees what others miss, someone who understands how the invisible infrastructure of a city actually works. Strategic advisor, head of security intelligence, legitimate position, legitimate salary, legitimate future." Laila stared at them, processing. "I've spent 7 years being nobody. I don't know how to be visible." "You've been visible to us since the moment you spoke, since you honored Sujin's teachings, since you saved my life, since you chose justice over vengeance. Now let yourself be seen by the rest of the world." "As what? The black girl who speaks Korean? The waitress playing spy?" "As Ji-won, as Laila, as both, as whoever you choose to be." The acceptance didn't come with fireworks or dramatic music. It came quietly, with Laila nodding once, then again with more certainty. "Okay, yes, I accept." 2 weeks after that, they sat together in a private room at a Korean restaurant, one of the Li family's legitimate businesses. No criminal connections, just excellent food and honest work. But this time, Laila wasn't serving. She sat at the table, dressed in professional attire that was hers, not a uniform. Li Mei and Liang sat across from her, and when the server brought their meal, Laila experienced the surreal dissonance of being served. "I'm both," she said, watching the server disappear into the kitchen. "Black and Korean, American and immigrant raised, visible and strategic. I don't have to choose anymore." Li Mei smiled, lifting her teacup in a small toast. "The Kim family gave you life twice. First, when they took you in and made you their daughter, and again through the mission they left you, the purpose that kept you alive when you had nothing else." Liang leaned forward, genuinely curious. "So what will you do with your third life, the one you get to choose for yourself?" Laila lived at the jade bracelet on her wrist, visible now in the restaurant's soft light. She thought about invisibility as a weapon and visibility as a choice. She thought about 7 years of existing in shadows and the strange, terrifying freedom of stepping into the light. "I think I'll start by living it," she said, and her smile was real, unguarded, really living it, not just surviving, not just hunting, living. Because here's what they don't tell you about invisible people: the servers, the housekeepers, the delivery drivers, all the people who move through your world without registering in your awareness. They see everything, they hear everything, and some of them, the ones with patience and purpose, they remember everything. Your voice is your power. Your story is your weapon. Never let anyone convince you that being underestimated is the same as being powerless. The world overlooks you at its own risk. Laila Chen, G1, the invisible woman who refused to stay invisible, had learned that lesson in fire and blood, and 7 years of patient warfare. And now, finally, she was ready to teach it to others. The warriors aren't always in the spotlight. Sometimes they're serving your coffee, and they're watching.